I am Nadav Ben-Honor, a 70-year-old man who served as a rabbi for more than 5 decades. Throughout my life, I was unwavering in my conviction that Jesus of Nazareth was not the Messiah. I debated the matter countless times, firmly rooted in traditional Jewish teachings. I quoted the Torah, clung to centuries of rabbinical interpretation, and stood proudly in the legacy of my ancestors. For most of my life, I was certain that I had chosen the path of truth. But all of that changed on a cold December afternoon, December 25th, 2023, a seemingly ordinary day that would unravel everything I believed in. That day, a near-fatal car accident hurled me into an experience so profound, so unsettling, that it would shake the very foundations of my soul. Let me begin by telling you who I was. I was born into a long line of Levites, descendants of the ancient priests, charged with sacred duties in the temple of God. This lineage wasn't just history to me, it was identity. From early childhood, I was taught that my bloodline carried a responsibility. I felt it deeply, not as a burden, but as an honor. I was raised to believe that serving God and preserving the traditions of our faith were the highest callings a man could embrace. After years of study in the yeshiva, I moved to Israel, the land of our ancestors, and settled in Jerusalem. There, surrounded by history and prophecy, I felt an even deeper connection to my Jewish identity. My son was born there, and I believed I was walking in the path of righteousness. I devoted myself fully to the Torah, to prayer, and to guiding others in the way of Jewish law. I never doubted that the Messiah would one day come, but I believed it was a day yet to arrive. Jesus, to me, was simply a figure misunderstood by many and wrongly followed by others. I dismissed him not out of hatred, but out of theological certainty, or so I thought. Then came that winter's day. I was driving home. The sky was gray, the road icy. Just a few kilometers from my house, the car in front of me stopped abruptly. I reacted quickly, slamming on my brakes, but it was too late. The tires skidded, the car spun, and I collided with another vehicle. The sound was deafening. Metal crunched, glass shattered. Then, nothing. A black void swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere entirely unfamiliar. At first, I believed I must be dreaming, perhaps drifting between life and death. But this place didn't feel like a dream. The air was dense and heavy. The darkness around me wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, oppressive, and suffocating. I could feel it pressing against my skin, tightening around my chest, gripping my soul. This darkness had a presence, a consciousness. It whispered, not with words, but with emotions. Regret, fear, rage. It was as though the very shadows mourned, cried out, and begged for release. I tried to move, but my limbs felt detached from any reality I had ever known. The silence was deceptive. Beneath it, I began to hear something, voices, not ordinary voices. They were anguished, tormented, moans and wails that spoke of unending pain. Whispers of betrayal, sorrow, and fury echoed through the unseen corners of that place. The air itself vibrated with suffering, and I knew deep within my being, this was not a place of rest. Suddenly, I began to fall. It was a slow, deliberate descent at first, but then the pace quickened. I was being pulled, dragged deeper and deeper into an abyss that defied description. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows. Gigantic figures, monstrous and grotesque, loomed ahead. They were part of the walls themselves, walls that pulsed like living organs. And in those walls were faces, hundreds, thousands. Their expressions frozen in agonized screams, their mouths open as if still pleading for mercy. Each face was embedded in the fleshy stone, a monument to eternal torment. I could feel their pain like a vibration in the air, like a chorus of souls crying from the pit of despair. Then I saw something that shattered me. Some of the faces, many in fact, were familiar. They belonged to men I had revered, great rabbis, esteemed scholars, teachers who had led communities, who had guided me, men of wisdom, men of influence. Yet here, they were not honored. They were tortured. Their eyes, once filled with knowledge and confidence, now burned with horror and hopelessness. I wanted to call out to them. I wanted to ask, why? What happened? Why are you here? But the truth was already taking form in my heart. If they were here, what did that say about me? This place, this darkness, was hell. Not a metaphor, not a spiritual lesson, not a symbolic state of being. No, this was literal, tangible, real. It existed. I was in it. I was surrounded by it, and it was endless. When the fall stopped, I found myself standing on the edge of an enormous valley. Fire raged in rivers through it, but the flames moved with strange purpose, like they were alive. The heat seared not just the skin, but the soul. I felt myself burning from the inside out, not with physical fire, but with a truth too intense to bear. All around me, shadowy figures moved, beings warped beyond recognition. They were not human, yet they bore traces of humanity. Their bodies were twisted, their mouths open in silent screams. They crawled, staggered, collapsed, and rose again, only to suffer more. I stood, unable to move. Then something shifted. In the distance, a light pierced the darkness. A figure stood there, tall, luminous, unshaken by the horrors around him. My breath caught. His eyes met mine. He didn't speak aloud, yet I heard him clearly. You read the words, but you missed me in them. It was Jesus. I knew it instantly, not because of his appearance, but because of his presence. It carried a weight of truth that crushed every excuse I had ever made. I felt exposed, laid bare. He didn't accuse me. He didn't condemn me, but his gaze revealed everything. The scriptures I had memorized, the traditions I had guarded, they had spoken of him, and I never saw it. I felt grief deeper than shame, grief for wasted years, grief for others I had led astray, grief for the truth I had ignored. Then, just as suddenly, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the light, and I was left alone again, surrounded by suffering, enveloped by truth. And as I stood there, struggling to grasp the magnitude of what I was witnessing, I began to notice something that sent a chill down my spine. Among the multitude of suffering figures surrounding me, I began to distinguish faces, men I had once admired, even revered. They were not ordinary individuals. These were esteemed rabbis, scholars of unmatched intellect, and spiritual leaders I had long respected. They had dedicated their entire lives to the study of the Torah, to serving God, and to guiding others in the faith. Many of them had authored commentaries I had studied in my youth. Some had once spoken words that brought comfort and strength during times of doubt. They were the very architects of my own understanding of Scripture. And yet, here they were, chained, broken, lost in the very depths of hell. The realization stunned me. I had believed, as many did, that such men were surely destined for paradise. Their devotion had seemed absolute, their command of Scripture flawless. If even they were condemned to such a fate, then what was left for me? For anyone? Their faces came into sharper focus as I walked forward, the cries of the damned echoing behind me like the sound of collapsing faith. The expressions I saw weren't vague reflections of sadness. They were unmistakably carved by the pain of knowing. These were not the faces of souls merely confused or terrified. These were the faces of those who had understood too late. Among them, one face burned into my soul, my mentor. He had taught me when I was just a boy, helping me navigate the mysteries of Leviticus, the Talmud, the Midrash. He had praised my discipline and encouraged my growth. I had sat at his feet for years, soaking up wisdom like parched earth. But now he sat hunched, his eyes sunken with grief, his shoulders trembling as if under a weight too heavy to carry. I approached him slowly, cautiously, every step tearing through my memories like a blade. "Rabbi," my voice cracked. "Is it really you? Why are you here?" He lifted his head. Recognition flickered across his tortured face, but it quickly gave way to shame. With a trembling voice, barely above a whisper, he spoke. "We were wrong, Nadav." His words dragged through the air like a funeral procession. The Redeemer came, and we rejected him. We missed him. The signs were there. The scriptures, so many of them pointed to him, but we were blind, proud, hardened. His confession pierced me to the core. Another man, standing nearby, added his voice. I recognized him vaguely, another rabbi of high esteem, though I could not recall his name. We held on to the law as if it were God himself. We honored tradition more than truth. When he came, the one the prophets foretold, we turned our backs, closed our eyes. We taught others to do the same. His words were not angry, nor accusatory. They were steeped in grief, an overwhelming sorrow that seemed to echo the cries all around us. These were men broken by revelation. I felt like the ground beneath me had given way. The doctrines I had built my life upon, the beliefs I had fiercely defended in debates, the convictions I had used to guide others, now felt like ashes slipping through my fingers. If these men, giants in faith and knowledge, had fallen short, then what did that mean for me? What did it mean for the people I had taught? I turned away, eyes brimming with tears, my heart pounding as though it might break through my chest. My entire world, the framework of truth I had relied on, was disintegrating before my eyes. And yet, just when the darkness seemed all-consuming, something changed. A light appeared. It was faint at first, like the first flicker of dawn against the night sky, a single point of brilliance amidst the void. But as I watched, it grew, larger, closer, brighter. The darkness around me began to shrink away, recoiling from the light like mist under the heat of the sun. It wasn't like any light I had known. It didn't merely illuminate, it healed. It didn't cast shadows, it revealed. The air around me shifted, the screams softened, the despair seemed to pause. And then, from the heart of the light, a figure stepped forward. He wasn't tall or imposing, yet his presence filled everything. He radiated purity, not just in appearance, but in essence. His face glowed with gentle strength. His eyes, deep and knowing, fixed on me as though he had always known I would be here, as though he had waited for this very moment. I fell to my knees without thinking. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Shame burned through me, not because he condemned me, but because I knew I had spent a lifetime refusing what he now offered so freely. He moved closer, and his gaze held me still. He didn't need to speak for me to understand. In his eyes, I saw every chapter of my life, my childhood dreams, my years of study, my pride, my fears, my failures, and I knew he saw it all. And still, he loved me. Then he spoke. His voice was unlike any voice I had heard, neither loud nor soft, but resonant with authority and compassion. I have come to show you the truth, he said. I called to you many times, Nadav, but your heart was closed. You pursued righteousness through the law, yet you missed the one who gave it. His words struck deep. Still, I have not abandoned you. I am here, not to condemn you, but to redeem you. I have chosen you to see, and now to carry this truth. The floodgates opened within me. All the debates, the hours of study, the sermons, the certainty. I saw it all for what it was. Sincere, but incomplete. I had chased holiness with zeal, but I had missed the heart of it all, him. And now, he was offering it to me, not because I had earned it, but because grace was greater than merit. He reached out his hand. Salvation is not earned through striving. He said, it is received through faith. The Father sent me to offer it freely, but you must choose. Will you trust in me? I was undone. Every part of me, mind, heart, soul, knew the truth. He was the one the prophets had spoken of, the Lamb, the Light, the Messiah, Yeshua. He had come for me, and though I had rejected him, he had never turned away. In the stillness, his words echoed once more, God loves you. I have come to save you, but the choice is yours. These words rang in my mind like a bell tolling deep within my soul. For the first time in my life, I understood the truth. All my years of devotion, all the sleepless nights studying Torah, every effort to earn God's favor, it had all been in vain. I had never truly realized that God's love was already mine, that his grace didn't need to be earned through perfection or rigid adherence to law. It had always been there, waiting for me to stop striving and simply believe. Standing before this radiant figure, I felt something unfamiliar, relief, the weight of guilt, the shame of having tried and failed for decades to be worthy, began to lift. For the first time, The constant burden I carried felt light in the warmth of his presence. The radiance around him was not merely bright, it was healing. It touched my soul and began unraveling years of religious fear and pressure. But just as peace began to bloom within me, a shadow passed through my heart. A single question: what if I turned away? What if even now, after everything I had seen and heard, I rejected this truth? What if I returned to the safety of the familiar, to the tradition, the law, the structure I had always known? That hesitation must have flickered across my face, because before I could speak, he responded, not with rebuke, but with an understanding that pierced deeper than words. "This darkness you've seen," he said, his voice firm yet gentle, "is the fruit of pride, of blind tradition, of fear disguised as faith. But I have not brought you here to shame you. I've come to lift you from it. I will not only save you, Nadav, I will give you purpose. You will become a light, guiding others who are as lost as you once were." These words didn't just promise salvation. They were a call to something greater, something I had longed for, but never found: a purpose, a life that meant more than ritual and repetition. At that moment, everything became clear. I was at a crossroads. I could return to the darkness, to endless regret and spiritual blindness, or I could surrender to this truth. I could embrace the second chance being handed to me. The choice weighed heavily on me. My hands trembled. Tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't sure I was strong enough, but through the confusion, I found the strength to whisper a single question, one that came not from my intellect, but from the aching of my soul. "What must I do?" He stepped closer. The kindness in his eyes didn't fade. Instead, it deepened. "Believe in me," he said. "You don't need to strive anymore. You don't need to carry the weight of your past. What I offer is a gift, freely given. Salvation is not earned, it is received." Those words settled into me with a profound peace, so deep, it was as though the storm of my soul had been stilled by a single command. All the pain, all the striving, all the years of spiritual loneliness, they began to dissolve in that moment. Without fully understanding how, I extended my hand, and when his hand met mine, everything changed. The screams of hell that had echoed through the abyss went silent. The suffocating darkness shattered like glass. The crushing weight that had gripped my chest disappeared in an instant. I was free. For the first time in all my 70 years, I felt freedom, not political, not social, but spiritual. I felt like a man stepping out of a prison cell into daylight. I stood, still trembling, in the presence of the one who had freed me, and I knew, without question, that my life would never be the same. This was not the end of a vision. It was the beginning of a new existence, one built not on fear, but on faith, not on tradition, but on truth, not on law, but on love. And I knew, deep within my soul, that I had chosen rightly. Then, without warning, the light around me began to fade, not suddenly, but gently, like a sunrise retreating in reverse. The warmth slipped away, and the next thing I saw was blinding white light, not heavenly radiance, but the cold, sterile glare of fluorescent bulbs. I blinked against it, confused. The hum of machines, the distant murmur of voices, the clinical scent of antiseptic, it all came rushing back. I was in a hospital, alive. I had survived the crash, even though I could barely move, and pain throbbed through my limbs. I knew my body was intact, but my soul, carried the imprint of something far more real than this world. The cries of the damned, the sorrowful faces of the rabbis, and most powerfully, the voice of Jesus still echoed within me. Every word rang in my memory, like thunder rumbling beneath the surface of my thoughts. I lay there, eyes unfocused, staring at the ceiling tiles as monitors beeped softly beside me. I replayed everything, moment by moment, over and over again. Was it salvation? Had I truly been saved? Would that darkness try to pull me back? I knew I had been rescued, drawn from the abyss by the light of Jesus. But now that I was back, lying in this fragile human shell, what was I supposed to do with this new truth? My heart was torn. My past clung to me like a second skin. I had spent my life studying at the yeshiva, teaching others, building my identity around the Torah and rabbinic law. Everything I knew, everything I loved, was tied to that heritage. To question it felt like betrayal, not just of myself, but of my family, my teachers, my ancestors. What would my community say? Would they call me a heretic, a fool? Would I be shunned, disowned? The fear of rejection gripped me, but so did the memory of what I had seen. Jesus' words returned to me like a song that could not be silenced. I have come to save you and to make you a light to your people. His call rang louder than my fear. I knew I couldn't turn my back on it. The truth was too powerful, too vivid. I had seen what happened to those who rejected it. I had seen the torment. I had heard their confessions. I could never pretend again. I was caught between two worlds, one I had lived in all my life, and one I had just barely begun to understand. I wasn't set ready to abandon my past, but I wasn't set willing to silence what had been revealed to me either. So I asked myself the question that now consumed every part of my being. Was Jesus the Messiah? If so, then this wasn't the end of my faith. It was the fulfillment of everything I had ever sought. Was he the one I had been unknowingly waiting for? And if he was, what was I willing to do about it? The questions circled my mind endlessly. I had no answers. Not yet, but I knew this. They demanded to be answered. What I experienced in those moments wasn't hallucination. It wasn't fantasy. It was a revelation that had shattered the walls around my heart. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't go back. So I made two decisions. First, I would revisit the beliefs that had shaped my life with an open mind. I would allow myself to question and to explore, free from the constraints of tradition or fear. Secondly, I resolved to embark on a personal journey, a pursuit of truth. I needed to understand who Jesus truly was, not through filtered opinions or institutional warnings, but for myself. I had to dig deeper into the revelation I had received, no matter how uncomfortable or unfamiliar it made me feel. I was standing at a crossroads, not one I could bypass or ignore, but one that demanded a decision. After leaving the hospital, I found no rest. The images and sounds of what I had seen in hell clung to me. The screams of tormented souls, the anguished cries of respected rabbis, and the echo of Jesus' words followed me into every waking moment. My old worldview, once so firm, now felt fragile, shaken by something far more real than anything I had encountered before. For most of my life, Rabbi Meir had been my spiritual compass. He had taken me under his wing when I was still a boy, and through him, I learned to love the scriptures. He taught me how to interpret the law, how to live with discipline, how to serve our people with reverence and wisdom. His mentorship had been the anchor of my Jewish identity. Yet despite my deep admiration for him, I could no longer deny what I had seen and heard. Something was calling me beyond the limits of tradition, beyond the teachings I had once considered immovable. One book in particular began to press heavily on my mind, the New Testament. At the yeshiva, we had been taught to reject it without question. It was a forbidden text, dismissed as heretical, even dangerous. We were warned that it would only lead to confusion or deception. But now, after what I had seen, I couldn't ignore the persistent pull drawing me toward it. I hesitated at first. My hands trembled as I reached for the dust-covered copy buried deep on my bookshelf. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find, but also desperate for answers. And then I read, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David." I froze. Those words, so simple, yet so powerful, struck me like lightning. That name, that lineage, it was impossible to ignore. I remembered Rabbi Meir teaching us that the Messiah would come through David's line. It was a foundational truth, one we had all clung to with confidence. Yet I had never once considered Jesus as the fulfillment of that prophecy. I had built a mental wall between myself and that idea, but now the wall was crumbling. Could it be true? Could the one I had so firmly rejected be the one I had been waiting for? The question sent chills through my spine. It was more than theological, it was deeply personal. I had based my entire life, my identity, my work, on a version of truth that now stood in question. As I read on, I found something unexpected. The teachings of Jesus, his words, his compassion, His warnings, his mission, they didn't feel foreign. On the contrary, they echoed the very principles I had cherished from the Hebrew scriptures. There was a familiar resonance that stirred something deep within me. His call to repentance, his parables, his concern for the lost. It was as if the scriptures I knew so well had come alive through him. And his message wasn't one of condemnation. It was an invitation. For so many years, I had tried to draw near to God by effort, by obedience, by knowledge, by sacrifice. But now I realized God had already made the way. He had come to us. Jesus was offering salvation as a gift, not something to be earned, but something to be received. This revelation unraveled me. The more I read, the more I felt a growing clarity and conviction. I began to understand that the path I had walked before had value, but it wasn't the destination. It had been a preparation for something greater. Though I still honored Rabbi Meir and all that he had poured into me, I began to see that God was leading me forward into unfamiliar territory. Yes, but into truth, real truth. The truth I had encountered was not abstract. It was alive. It was reshaping my very being. And though I feared what it might cost me, my reputation, my relationships, even my identity, I knew I could not turn away. Jesus had shown me something more real than anything I had ever experienced. And once seeing, it could not be unseen. The decision to follow him was not an easy one. It meant risking everything. But as I read, prayed, and listened, I found that my fear began to shrink. It was replaced by something stronger, peace, a peace that surpassed knowledge, a peace rooted not in religious performance, but in grace. Grace that said, "You are already loved." Grace that said, "Come." In that grace, I found purpose. For the first time in my life, I understood why I had been born into the Levite line, why I had studied the scriptures so passionately, why I had always longed for something more. God hadn't just rescued me, he had called me. He had given me a mission, not just to believe, but to speak, to share, to reach others who, like me, had been earnestly seeking but unknowingly missing the truth. This message, this truth about Jesus, was not just for me, it was for the world, for Jews and Gentiles, for the broken, the righteous, the doubting, the devout. And it was a message worth giving my life to, even if it cost me everything, even if it made me a stranger among my own people, even if it meant walking a lonely road. Because this road, this calling, was paved by God himself. With every passing day, I felt a stronger conviction to speak boldly, to share what I had seen, what I had experienced, not with arrogance, but with love, not with pride, but with urgency. I knew what waited on the other side of disbelief. I had seen it, and I could not remain silent. This wasn't just a new belief system. It was a new life, a new purpose, a rebirth, and I embraced it fully. Today, I walk forward, not in confusion, but in clarity, not in shame, but in freedom, not in fear, but in boldness. Because I have seen the light, I have heard his voice, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is the Messiah, the fulfillment of everything I once longed for. I am no longer just Nadav ben Honor, the rabbi. I am a witness to grace. I am a messenger of hope. My mission is clear, and I will share this truth with all who are willing to listen, confident that this message holds the key to life and eternal peace.